Welcome. Today we are going to talk about SQL date and time extended data type and integrating with that. My name is Maria Barnes. I'm the chapter president of Access Lunchtime. I welcome everybody, whether you're returning or new today. I am by no means an expert on date and time, so I hope that you learn some things anyway, especially if you haven't really taken the time yet to explore the recently added extended data type. We can hopefully answer questions you might have about this, either through what I've got lined up to present today, or we can also do some QA at the end. And if I don't know, perhaps one of the other experts on here does know already, or we can try to work it out together. So before we get started, I actually wanted to do a quick demo of our new website. So this is AccessUserGroups.org, and it's got our new logo on it. I am not fully trained on this yet, so I don't know everything, but it does have now, besides an event calendar that has nicely in calendar format all of the groups on it, so you can see the lunchtime sessions. They're the last Tuesday of each month. Note it's the last Tuesday, not the fourth Tuesday. Not always the same. We do have both the option here to choose a group to go back and forth between the groups. So like if you were going to lunchtime group, I think it goes more to stuff centered on lunchtime. We also have a login area where you can not only register, but you can log in. And then there's supposed to be a kind of member dashboard, and you should be able to, I think, switch back to lunchtime versus other ones if you're a member of other groups. And there's supposed to be someplace on here, maybe if you click on you and their account details, a list of all the member or all the groups are in, so you can actually subscribe to more than one group at a time. So some neat things to explore, and maybe I can tell you some more about it next month. So we have the date time extended that we are talking about it. And if you don't know by now, Crystal, who is on here, is our editor for our recordings. She puts those together and spends a lot of time and effort. We have a really nice product now. So I totally thank you, Crystal, for all the efforts you put on into that and making our recordings. Date time. What is date and time extended? It's similar to the date time data type. It provides a larger date range than the date and time type provides, and I do have a comparison both for the Access and the SQL equivalent for those two types, so you'll be able to see more about that in just a minute. It also provides a higher fractional precision, so when you're talking about hours, minutes, and seconds in the time, then if we're talking about milliseconds, nanoseconds, those kind of precision, there's much more in the date and time extended than the regular date and time. The date and time extended in Access is compatible with the SQL Server datetime 2 data type or date type. That was available starting around SQL 2014. And if you are using an ODBC driver for SQL Server of like 11 and up. So you have to be using at least versions at or newer than each of those in order to be able to connect to a SQL Server datetime 2 time. Why would we need a larger date range? Why would we use datetime extended? I myself don't have a need for this in most of the applications I use because most of them are business applications and they're talking about data that's, in real time. Some of the dates might be birth dates or anything, that's something that might go back to, maybe 1850 at the earliest, but we still have a date range that is okay, and no need for precision. But in cases where you're doing stuff like timing races, or if you want to integrate with something like SQL Server's temporal tables, that's an option in SQL Server starting in about 2016 to track changes. There's probably other use cases. If you have one that you use, I invite you to put that in the chat so others can benefit for why other business or other logical reasons why you might want to use date and time extended. We do want to have a warning here. If you use date and time extended in Access, then your database is not backward compatible. This was implemented in the 365 version, roughly version 2010, which again, Microsoft's versioning is the first 2 digits for the year and then the second 2 for the month. So that was roughly October of last year. And if you are developing an application and you want to use date time extended, then people need to have a version of Access runtime or whatever you require or have them use that's compatible with that date. Otherwise, they won't even be able to open the database. It'll give them a warning. And the 2 things that you do here to add this is to explicitly add a date time extended column to a local table, or if you go to Tools, Options, Current Database, and you check the Support Date Time Extended, Date Time 2, this whole big long option. It's at the very bottom. There's 2 options at the very bottom of the current database section, and that is there. There's also another warning. When you create expressions and use date time functions based on the date time extended data type in Access, you might lose precision in calculations or encounter other problems with results. So this is from the Access team. They're aware of the issue. They plan to better support some expressions and functions in an upcoming release. But as a workaround, if you're doing something, you could create a pass-through query to use SQL Server equivalents and get a date time result back from that. I have heard that some of the SQL Server functions have problems with date time too as well. So I don't have any specific examples of that, but you might double check to make sure whatever you are trying to do in SQL Server is supported to the precision level that you want it to be supported. And I am going to go into Access and kind of demo all these things, but I thought I would get through them first. So we had some basis for when we were, when we were talking about this. Right now I'm comparing the Access data types, date time, which has been around forever, and the new date time extended. The regular date time is actually just stored as a double precision floating point number that can have up to 15 decimal places. The integer part of it represents the date and the decimal part represents the time. There's actually, I believe, in the next section here where it talks about the date range. It's from 100 AD, January 1st, to 9999, 1231. And 0, as far as an integer, actually it amounts to this date here. If you've got a date earlier than that, it's actually stored as a negative number. So I didn't really realize that. I wasn't aware of that, and that would be probably pretty behind the scenes for you. Maybe if you were doing something like exporting to Excel and you didn't have that row defined as a date time, you could see that number and figure out what it was. The date time extended, however, is actually a string, an encoded string of 42 bytes. And then the range for that goes all the way back to the 001 year. So we got 99 more years in date time extended. And I don't know if you have ever tried this or noticed. I tried to get Access to do something like say, nope, I don't support that time by entering in something like a year of 99. Well, it converts anything below 100 per year to 19 whatever. So that's how, and you can never get an invalid date, but it's not the date that you were trying to put in. So, and then the date time extended time range is very similar with the exception of that you've got the extra precision in 7 decimal places. So that gets down to 1 nanosecond. We've got down to 0.001 seconds in one versus 1 nanosecond in the other. Then if we're looking at SQL, because remember we talked about our access datetime mapping to SQL datetime type, and the new datetime extended can map to datetime 2. SQL has a different range. Notice that it only goes back to 1753. I've actually had this bite me before in that I've used an isDate function in Access VBA to see if the date is valid. And then I try to write back to a SQL table and suddenly it's not valid because you can do 1752 in Access and it's a valid date all the way down to 100 is valid. But SQL datetime cannot store that small of a date or small of a year. So for SQL, we can go down to time-wise, 23, 59, 59, 997. Notice that it's not 999. It actually has 3 spots that it rounds to. So I believe if you have 999, it would round down to 997. And then there's like a, oh, it says right here, 0, 3, or 7, rounded to increments. So maybe 999 would round up to 0, 0, 0. You have to play with that if that's important. But it's nice to know that it doesn't actually give you all the way down to that character totally. And in datetime 2, it goes up to 100 nanoseconds precision, 8 bytes to store a date time, and the datetime 2 storage is actually pretty complicated. It's 6 bytes for precision less than 3, meaning after the ending decimal place on the time, 7 bytes for precision 3 or 4, and then all other precision requires 8 bytes. So it's actually a more compact storage for most of the precisions than the date time is, believe it or not. Could save you some space. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go now then to Access. Okay, so this is just standard Northwind database that I have added stuff to as I've been doing presentations. So there's some things in here that you will not see in like a normal database. So I did add some link tables. So I added some link tables to a SQL Server Express instance of those tables to illustrate a couple things. If you link to SQL and you can't change design, but you can see what date you have and what type in Access it's mapped to. If you have an existing database, even if SQL is datetime 2 and you have not enabled the extended version, you will actually see this mapped as datetime, not date extended. You have to first go to Options, Current Database, and again, it's all the way down here at the bottom. So there's 2 options, supporting large number and supporting date time for linked import tables. You have to check that and say, okay, and then relink, and then you will get it linking to the date time extended version. So that's something important to remember. It provides the capability to do that, but only if you have that box checked. And of course, you can do the same thing. You can have your own table and you can design it. And this old date time is, in this case, the regular one, and the extended is with the new one. As soon as you either define your own with date time extended as a choice, or you check that checkbox, then you will actually get a warning message when you do that. But then you've got your database in a state where it cannot be used by older versions. So be careful about that. Know your user environment, who's you're designing this for, and their capabilities before you go playing with it. This is this purchase order details that is connected to date time extended. I actually have one here that's just for playing with, where I've got one that has just an old type date time and a newer type date time extended, so we can play with that a little bit and see some differences. I think that I updated a value on here so you can see sample. If you have date time extended types, you can get this additional precision here that you wouldn't have for the others. I also have a date back in 1700 that I entered in here. This is a range that wouldn't have been allowed in the old way with the old type, and it's now allowed here. So we can actually see that here by trying to do something like that. If we try, I think I made this an auto number. You get a message like this, that the date time to resulted in an out of range value. And that's a little bit weird of a message because this one is not date time to, right? It's the other one. But if you put same value here, still get the same message, date time to, even though this is not a date time to type. So the message is a little weird. But if you then update it and you put a date like 1800, then you get a valid date, which you can actually save there. Colin has asked a question, which we can go ahead and try. He asks, what happens to these fields if we later uncheck that box? And I'm hoping that it does what Adrian suggested, which is tells you can't do that because you're making use of it. But let's give it a try, right? I told you I was not an expert in date times. We can, figure out the answers to questions together. Let's say, okay, you must close and reopen it to take effect. Just compact and repair so I don't have to worry about it. But it let you do that. Now, did that actually save? Let's see. Yep, it's saved. Let's take a look at our link table. It still says it's here, but I suspect if we go and relink the table, which let's try, see if we can do that. Forget which one is under which, that one. So succeeded. Now we're back to date time. So it looks like it holds it, but then during relinking, it applies that property, if you would call it, of your current database and links it using the time that you would, or the kind that you would switch to. So if I then went back to, sure, we can look at the local table. It leaves it alone. Okay, so you don't have to check both. The checkbox on the current options is about linking. It gives you the ability to go to that when you're linking or importing tables. The local table and whether or not you set it up as that or not is separate. The decision on whether or not, whether your database has to be used in the newer version or not, or openable, I should say, in older versions, is based on either this being checked or you using an extended datetime extended type in a local table. So even if you had this unchecked, you would not be able to use this database with older versions because you had a data type that is in one of your local tables. Teresa, you want to know if the data is still correct when you change. In that link table, you mean? So because it shows just the interface, the access side is got not the precision for this. It's just what's being displayed. So this is actually a linked table. Remember, Teresa, that data is actually in SQL. So unless you went and you edited something in Access, which it might remove that. Yes, you're right. It does show 1700. So it's got that part saved. Too fun. What if I, right now, because I haven't checked that back again, what if I try going to 1701? Probably it's going to be okay. And the reason is that this is, well, I don't know. It's a good question, but in SQL, that is actually set to a datetime too. So it's like for SQL, it will take the date ranges that SQL allows because Access thinks that's a valid date, right? But it doesn't have the precision. Over here, because this one is mapped to another type, you still can't, even in here, you can't do this because SQL doesn't like it. It's SQL that's, you know, bogging down here and telling you this. All right, so I feel like we're getting a little bit off track here. But I gotta go back. All right, let's go back and turn this back on here. I'm gonna link to it. All right.
While you're doing that, just to bring your attention, I believe that the error message that you called out earlier was not incorrect. It was talking about the value, not the field, being a datetime too, or extended. Does that help?
Well, maybe because we were looking at this table here, right?
Yeah, go for it.
Which now is, if you look at design view, it's, well, we didn't relink it. Let's relink it.
No, well, don't worry about that. The first one, the old date, is still an old date, you know, a standard date time.
Right.
So if you try to put a 1700 date in there earlier than 1752, and it complains, the message will say this is invalid because you're trying to put a datetime 2 value in a datetime field.
Oh, okay. You think that's what it means?
I think that's what it means.
Make it happen. The conversion of a datetime to data type to datetime data type resulted in out of range. So you're right. I thought it was confusing because I thought it was giving the wrong message.
It's a bit.
I thought it should have said something like, this is a datetime data type, not allowed, right? But what it's trying to actually do, it recognizes that 1700 has to be datetime 2, and it's trying to convert for you into the field, which is datetime, and so then it's giving you this message. So good catch on that one. I just thought it was a bad error message.
SQL Server, or actually, to be fair, the ODBC driver that interprets it isn't always brilliant at expressing things in a way that people understand easily. You have to take that on the chin.
I'm not sure about you, but any error message that's longer than about 10 words is like, what? So yeah, you have to really read it. So yeah, great catch on that one. I did want to show you briefly SQL Server so you can see these. If you take a look, for example, at this in design view, datetime 2 has also the precision in SQL Server. So you can see that. And you actually, when you are editing something in Access, you can see something similar. The interface is just a little bit different. So when you see date time type, you've got, these values right here as far as the other setup. When you have date time extended, you have an additional decimal places where you can set your precision. I think if I recall right, the default is something like 2, and then you can change it to be higher up to 7. So there's that to play with, and that kind of corresponds to this indicator here in SQL, as far as to how many points after the decimal point on the sub-seconds that you see on that. So then the other thing that I did just to kind of illustrate is I have a query. Yeah. I have a query where I used a datetime function. So this just uses a date add to the submitted date. And this submitted date in purchase orders is a datetime extended date type. So I wanted to illustrate what it does as far as functions and access right now. And keep in mind, that is where that warning came from, that the access team understands that this is an issue and it's not totally accurate. But they wanted to get support for datetime extended out there, at least in part. But you need to kind of be aware of the differences. So here on this side, we've got one value and we've got another value that's +1 days to it. And it works, right? We've got 425, we've got 426. But notice here on this one where we've got precision, well, all 4 of these really, right? Where you have precision stored in SQL, when you add the day to it, you lose that precision in your result. So you need to be aware of that. If that's important for some reason, if the precision is important, you probably don't want to use the date time in it. And I have heard of other Access developers. Yeah, exactly. Crystal's saying, did you try to get it as a string? I've heard of other Access developers trying to get around that by storing it instead as a string or teaching it as a string. It does look like a formatting problem, but I think there's more to it than that, Adrian. I think the result from the function actually doesn't have the precision. So it's almost like you would have to get this right, turn this value into a string, parse out what's to the right of the decimal point, make the computation, then put back in. It is zeros, but we can, let's put something in here, right? Still loses the precision, right? So it's not just that it had zeros and it's like rounding or anything like that. It's truly, truly losing those values. Let's do some more. Got it? 0.21 should be the same. Just to make sure it's not just, yep. So word of warning. All right. So I'm going to just open it up now. We've got plenty of time for questions. Let's try to stick at first to questions about date time extended or dates and times in general. And we'll try to answer everything we can on that. And then after that's completed, we can open it up for other questions that people might want to have.
I have a question, Maria.
Okay.
Because I kind of missed a little bit about what you did to try to see it as a string.
So I haven't done that myself, but to just talk about that again.
Yeah. Well, what if we go to the design view and just change the column that's showing to just do a, convert it to a string and see what we see in there?
Sure. All right. So if we want to use in here the submitted date, and we want to convert that to a string, what function do you want to use?
Well, just, we can like try an implied one.
Or add a zero length string to it.
Oh, hey, that's a good start.
What was that?
Just do a ampersand and then a zero length string, double quote. That usually converts like a number to a text.
Like that, ampersand?
I
And
can't
that-
read it.
Yeah, and that was Dwayne. Just do like quote, quote. So just add a zero length string to whatever it is.
Oh,
That'll
okay.
do an implicit conversion.
Maria, the ampersand character is the one above the 7, and it's like and. You think of it as and?
Got it.
That's chappy.
But you got to
Oh,
put it
so-
after.
So I'm going to put it after then.
And you might have to put in your square brackets.
Hey, you know, Shift F2 and make the font big so we can actually see what you're typing.
We can work it out from there, Chris.
That's all right.
No, I want to see it now.
Got
All right, so this is what I'm
Nice.
typing.
nice one,
Okay.
Maria.
I've got in brackets the table field, and then an ampersand, and then two double quotes to get a null string essentially, or an empty string. Okay,
Not a null string, but just a string.
an empty string, really. String.
It's called a null string, I think.
Yeah,
Krista.
I think we do call it a null string. All right, so let's run that, and we get an error.
What was it? Yeah.
So we might have to do a format.
So maybe a CSTR, you know, wrap it in CSTR, or maybe let's see if the format function works. Do like format open
Let's try
paren.
this one first. CSTR.
Star is only going to
Oh, Shift
Nice.
F2. We can't see what you're doing, Maria.
Ah.
Magic.
Maria's not as used to using Shift F2 as you are, Crystal.
I'm not as up to on all the function keys as you are, period, the shortcut key.
Crystal is brilliant at that.
She is. Okay, again, an error.
To be fair, CSTR, like a numeric one, would only convert it to the ANSI values of
Well,
what
that's why I wondered if they made the format function work.
That's another one to test, but it still wouldn't.
Yeah, so
converts it
So the
to-
problem is it's still
No.
a function, so it may
Okay.
not.
So,
It may not
and
work,
now you
right?
need to give it, a comma, double quote, and then the pattern.
double
Yeah,
quotes.
so
Amateur.
How about year, month, day, space,
Yeah, I'm just trying to-
HMMSS.
You're talking too fast, but so month, whoops.
Just put it in the
day.
chat.
And then we've got what,
HH.
hours?
HH,
In Spain, it would be JJ.
NN.
Yeah.
M or N?
N. Minute.
Did you put it in the chat?
SS. End quote.
All right.
Sierra.
And then, end quote. End quote.
Well, yeah, but we don't.
Well, she's trying to do the decimal places, Crystal.
We're trying to do the decimal places.
Yeah, well,
that
except for,
concept sent?
I doubt.
Do we even know what those are?
Yeah, let's just do a 0, 0, 0, 0
Yeah,
to get
let's
4
see.
of them.
I did 5, but
Yeah, well, it's not going to get them anyway.
I don't think so either. I think it's gonna fail.
Yeah, what I'm trying to see is just what it can pull out. You know, you got to give it a valid pattern. Take off that
Yeah.
stuff at
Oh.
the end.
What the? It's
I'm
not
going to
weird.
suggest that you use single quotes instead of double. That technically they should be single quotes.
No, I wouldn't say that.
I did.
I usually
And I
use.
thought-
Okay. Well, SQL Server. Yeah, you're right. But this is
anything
a
in that,
query.
anything in SQL at all. Jet SQL, ACE SQL should be using single quotes. you get away with double quotes because Access is forgiving.
All right, let's try single.
Okay, well, the format function though is an access oh, what's that bang at the end? That was a typo.
Where?
Oh, it's gone now.
Oh, it was a double quote.
Okay.
Sometimes when the cursor moves, it makes things change a bit, and it appears as if you're looking at one thing and it's actually something else when you remove the cursor.
Right. So nothing's working well.
Okay, so now my next, I mean, my first thought would have been to send the value to user-defined function and convert that to a string and see what it had there. I know that's probably beyond the scope of what you want to do now, but that
You also need to realize, though, that it's actually stored as an encoded string of 42 bytes. So that doesn't necessarily mean, something that's easily readable in Access. If I come across an example of how someone's done that, I seem to think that they were asking questions about trying to do that and maybe having some difficulties, and maybe part of the reason was because of something like this, that they had trouble actually getting this date into a string format that they could manipulate in such a way that would be needed to add back the what's after the decimal. So that may have been the whole issue. Let's see, copy and paste into NotePad. All right, let's give that a try, Dwayne.
Not that one. Yeah, try the second column, the submitted
The
plus
submitted.
one.
Why the submitted one?
Just because it's showing with truncated, and then
You
that
want to
would
see if it's really got a value that's not?
right.
Okay, I'm
Just
trying
for
this one
giggles.
first.
Yeah.
To it.
Or the whole record, the whole bottom record.
I would think it's unlikely, Dwayne. It's good thinking, but I think you'd expect that more from Excel than.
So that worked.
Oh,
There's your text.
But have you
That's-
copied? Ah, no, yeah.
That one, I would try
So
the
you
one
could
that actually has the
maybe-
precision, the last
maybe you could-
line.
Maybe you could go to, okay, good. Maybe you could go to using the clipboard, right? If you do a copy of the value into the clipboard, seems like that might work.
Now try the second column, please.
This one here.
Maria, before
Yeah.
you do that, can I suggest you don't do it the way you're doing it, which is selecting individual items from within the field, but you go up one and down one and select the whole field.
Good call.
I'm not sure if you
Okay.
follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, I am.
You do.
So go to this and
Down arrow, then copy. And that is the same, yeah. I expected it to be, but at least it's more of a thorough check, I guess.
yeah, you can get different values like that. I noticed it sometimes takes like more of a cell approach, like Excel does when you do it from moving up and down and copying the whole selected thing rather than just selecting the text. But it looks like it is the same in this cases. So what else, Crystal, you thought about using? Just talking about in Access, because we could also do a pass-through query, which is something they suggest, and rely on SQL's capabilities.
Maria,
Mhm.
yeah, I was going to suggest string convert, STRCONV. And I don't know the second parameter that you need. That's the conversion type. 0, just change it to a 0 and do an OK. And now do Control F2. So you go into the expression builder. Instead of Shift F2 to zoom it up, do Control F2. You can do like a Control mouse wheel to make that bigger in that little area right there. But there you can actually look up the functions and you can press F1 then to get it to go to the help page. But look up STRCONV, go to the VBA functions, built-in functions, and go to STRCONV You might need to show all of them there in that
It'd be a
page.
string rather than a date time, I think.
Yeah, and find out what that second parameter is so that it converts it from, you know, binary.
Maria, it'll be text if you, but you'll be there now, yeah. You could pass it. One down. That's comparison.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't see because it's so little.
You think you've got problems.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if I can hit on this for
Yeah, LCID,
required integer.
locale ID. Oh, wonderful. I don't.
Time ones, which are in a
As
separate,
much.
because that's not what we want, I don't
No.
think. I thought I remembered they were like 101 and stuff like that, but maybe I'm thinking SQL. All right, do we have any other chat that's been helpful? Alan, I'm not sure what your comment is. I don't think it has anything to do with actual this query, but we can move to that while we're trying to figure this out. You say here that you had considered using DTX FIEWLDS. I don't know what that is. For
Datetime
speed
extended
tests.
fields.
Oh, okay. Datetime extended fields it's supposed to say for speed tests, but you don't think it's as viable as it stands. At this point, we have some limitations, right? Some severe limitations, really, to using this. The best use case I can think of right now is if you are trying to view and not do anything with the precisions from SQL, then use it, connect to it. You can see it just fine. It's if you need to do anything with it that you're going to have some problems. That Access is really not ready for all of that yet. But if you're just like trying to view audit tables or view, you know, timestamps with that precision in it, then by all means use it to connect.
Colin said go back to his 636 one, setting the default value to now causes the precision to be lost as well. You also can't update a DTX field to now as it's effectively a text field. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
So can you say that a little slower, Adrian?
Of
Because
course
I don't think I followed the question from that.
I'm not sure it's exactly a question, but I'll read it out anyway.
Yep.
Setting the default of a DTX field to now causes the precision to be lost as well. You also
that would make sense.
Yep. You also can't update a DTX field to now as it is effectively a text field. I'm not sure if that's true, but well, actually, it looks like it might be.
I just tried that with an update query.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work.
Failed. Okay.
You can't update it to now. I wouldn't expect you to be able to.
So let's try the default value and see what happens, right? So we're going to go to the table. We're going to go to a new one, right? Looks like this is it. That looks decent to me.
It's not extended format, but it's still.
It's not using the precision, right? It's formatted as 00, but you better believe that if we're adding a new row here.
That's what I did. I added a new record.
Yeah. Right. So I am, by clicking on this, it's adding it, right? And then we can maybe, you know, we've got, so what's updating here is the seconds, but the precision is not updated. I did not hit that at the 0.000. It's just not recording those. That precision Maria, from now.
Sorry. There's a bit of a confusion there. When you clicked on it, I believe at that point it was when you open the table. It was resolved when you open the table. In other words, when you clicked a new record, it resolved now. That 125302 would be, if you go to that record, it'll be still that value, even though when you do it, it'll be well past that.
But what's happening is the seconds are updating and the minutes and stuff, but the ... is really not real, right?
Indeed.
It's always saying, it's giving you your four point places of precision, but they're not accurate. They're all 0, 0, 0.
Indeed.
Because you better bet I did not hit that 1 on this at exactly 31.000. There was probably something that should have been recorded in now, but now only returns through seconds. It doesn't return anything beyond precision. Okay, so we're going to do an update here. So we're going to change this to an update. We're going to update the extended time to now, right? And you want to run that.
Oh, that's a text.
Oops. I got to put equal on here.
I think you might need to, yeah. Oh, do Shift F2 again, so we can see what's going on. If you wouldn't mind, Mary.
Maybe it's just now without the
Parenthesis. Did you try equals now open close?
I thought so, yes.
I
Try-
think it's
so we can
it's a string field.
Maybe, and is this the problem that you had when you tried it, Colin?
I tried it and it just basically said it wasn't a date field, so I couldn't use now. So it put it in inverted commas, just like you had.
It makes sense.
Pretty much makes sense.
Yeah, because it's trying to do a conversion here.
Maria?
On now?
Sorry to jump in. I've noticed the time, and there's one enormous issue that we haven't touched on, and I think it should be at least raised, which is my question or my comment from 636 Sims Collins, which is how accessible these values are from VBA.
Yeah, that's a great question.
And they're not,
So-
essentially.
I opened that table and this record set. So we've got the field. Actually, I think we want 1 is the extended one, right?
Oh, that's a good way to do it.
Okay, extended date time. So then we can take a look at, for instance, the value of it. And look at that. It's showing the length of it. We're on the first record here. Maybe we want to move
You know, maybe we can get a
others.
string. If we send the value as to a user-defined function as a variant, and then have the return value be a string, perhaps we can get that and we can parse it.
I think you're overcomplicating. It might be that it will go to a variant. Maria, could you try assigning it to x? X equals, and then the rst.field value.
Yeah,
Just change the question mark to
I
x,
think we had one that was,
and then question mark x.
get one that actually has values. Okay, so sorry, what did you want to do to it? You want to back here.
Add the yellow bar up, or right click and sit next.
So here's X.
So it's a variant has taken it. A variant has taken, but is that's still only 3 decimal points? You can't do, try adding,
Yeah, I'm not sure what our table was. Let's take a look. That's exactly what it was. So let's try to add some more.
interesting. Yeah, that'd be good.
Actually, I set that up as 4 places in my table. So it's taking all
4's good
4
enough.
of them.
4's good enough because it tells you it's not the old type.
Right.
By the way, you know to reset where that is, you can also drag it with the mouse. You can drag the yellow pointer with the mouse if you want to.
Really?
Yeah, you just drag it up.
That?
You'll need to, not on the dim command, but you can do it to the X or any of the others.
That's a new trick. I think that I know Crystal's got a great idea. She wants to try a custom function. So I think that's a great thing to do. but we're not going to do it today. You can try that on your own and take a look and see, maybe that would work for you. Obviously, we've got some different results that look a little better from VBA. They look like strings, so perhaps you could do something with that. I will try to find the reference that I remember seeing about using VBA and the problems with it and post that as a blog post follow-up to this. But I did want to leave with just resources. There's one, and I will publish this PowerPoint as soon as I can figure out how to do so to the updated website. I'll publish this PowerPoint, but this has a nice reference to Microsoft talking about it a little bit more. I'll put that in the chat. Hopefully you've learned a little something, and I do think obviously we have more to learn about this, more work to do from the Access team on this in the future to make it fully functional for us. But it's a start, right? We're able to actually just see those precision values. Okay.
I found very interesting. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you all.
Excellent. Thanks, Maria.
And this is Maria, so this isn't a hang around and chat for half an hour.